Let's see what happens.
Looks like the end of the world over here. Oh dear.
So if anybody's watching this right now, we're just trying to confirm that we are actually live on the Sportsbook Review channel. We've got a bit of a Baku review to tell you what happened last week, and then we're going to go into the Austrian preview. Just bear with us a second while we
Shall we
see.
call it back up to Baku?
When I came back earlier,
Back up to Baku. So
Yeah,
I
you
can't
guys are
tell.
live. I see you up.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's get going. So, Mr. Sportsbook Review, producer, if you wouldn't mind pausing to let us get on with this sweaty review. Sorry, not pausing, just mute your Skype.
Whose chair is this?
What? Sorry.
We can just get the producer to mute the Skype there.
Yeah, which is
Mr. De Rossa, could you mute your Skype for us? Guys, we're going to give you some betting tips for the Austrian GP. I think he's gone muted there. Excellent. Fantastic. Let's get on with this. Welcome to the Sportsbook Review betting preview of the Austrian Formula One Grand Prix. I'm Richard Spanners Ready, the host of Missed Apex podcast. I'm joined by my regular co-host and host of E-Radio show, Matt Trumpets. How's it going there, Matt?
Oh, it's going great. How about yourself?
Yeah, it is hot. It is hot here in the UK. We are enjoying tropical weather. That is why I look all shiny and sweaty. Face powder is on order.
Yes, that blue glare from your monitor does wonders for your complexion, I must say.
So we are here to give you a preview of the Austrian Formula One Grand Prix taking place this Sunday. Let's see if we can help you lay down your cash on some smart bets this weekend. Let's make betters better. Please bet responsibly. Matt and I host a regular live stream and podcast on Sundays called Missed Apex Podcast. We do it after the race at 8 p.m. UK time on the Missed Apex Podcast YouTube channel. Thank you to Sportsbook Review for allowing us to enter your home. So, Matt, let's address this. Baku was nuts. That race was madder than a box of frogs.
I think you could safely say the result was somewhat unexpected when all was said and done.
Well, let's go into that then, because this is what we call a bad beat for bettors. I don't think anyone who had a sensible gambling brain did well at all out of the Baku Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo, completely unexpectedly, on a power track with his downforce heavy and power light Red Bull, managed to end up on the top step of the podium.
Yeah, it was quite the event. And you'd have to say, really, if you're looking at the top three teams, they're going to be Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull. And if you're looking at people's chances, maybe you might have put him ahead of Raikkonen, just assuming that Bottas would have driven into Raikkonen automatically, as he does every race.
It seems like the Finns do like coming together. But yes, that race had the top four being the two Mercedes and the two Ferrari written all over it. But let's see what happened to those usual suspects. Because this was not a track that Red Bull were going to win on. First off, like you said, the two Finns clashed into each other. I think in turn 2 or 3, Raikkonen tried to go around the outside of Bottas. Bottas hit a curb. The result was two people trying to occupy the same bit of space by the Armco, and both Finns ended up with damage. I think Raikkonen had his floor flapping about underneath him for a little while, which eventually actually caused the first safety car. And I think Bottas got a puncture. So that effectively took both of them out of the race for the lead.
Yeah, there was just basically loads of debris. And no sooner did they get it started than they had the same thing all over again. Only this time there was so much wreckage on the restart that Alonso sort of said, hey, Charlie, might be a good idea to just bring everybody in and clean the track up before we've all got punctures and destroy our cars trying to drive back to the pits.
So I think we had a total of 3 restarts. Eventually we had a red flag and the cars had to all come out again. And this really does lead to chaos. It shakes the pack up because before the red flag, we still had 2 of our 4 usual suspects up in the lead. We had Lewis Hamilton comfortably leading Sebastian Vettel. Then a thing happened behind the safety car, Matt.
Well, yeah, I'd say just a minor thing. Vettel got rather irate at Hamilton because he thought he'd been brake checked, and Vettel had driven into the back of Hamilton. And then because he was irate and thought he'd been brake checked, he drove up beside Hamilton and then, shouted at him some and drove into him again, which is going to be,
Controversial.
a penalty. There's no getting around it.
I've never seen anything like that in Formula One. We've seen people in racing incidents at 200 miles an hour, not give someone enough room or try and push them out wide. But we've never seen somebody not under racing conditions just drive up next to another driver and take out his anger using his car as a battering ram. It was somewhat spectacular.
It was also somewhat illegal. It violated pretty much every regulation there was about driving around under the safety car. And not surprisingly, as a result, Mr. Vettel saw himself penalized rather severely with a 10-second stop-and-go penalty that had to be served during the race. In other words, they weren't going to add time afterwards. He was forced to come in and sit in the pit lane and actually... say what you will about the Italians, their espresso is delightful. Their stopwatches, maybe not so much. It wound up being about a 15-second stop before he actually got off. So he lost an extra 5 seconds.
So he would have lost a total of 35 to 40 seconds, and that was enough to take him out of contention for the lead. That's a big, big loss of time. So we are still left with our 1 out of 4 usual suspects, Lewis Hamilton, out in the front. Easy, right? All his main rivals, easy win for Lewis Hamilton. Bizarrely, when they restarted after the red flag, they failed to secure his headrest in his car. And as the aerodynamics kicked in down the long straight, you could see the air lifting the headrest out from behind him. And the somewhat startling sight of a 3-time world champion reaching up behind his head to try and hold the headrest down. But eventually they said, no, enough's enough. You've got to come in to fix that. And that actually cost him even more than Vettel's stop and put him behind in 5th place.
Yeah, it was the timing of it in that Hamilton came in before Vettel did, and he wound up, I think, stuck behind some traffic. And it was just enough, or rather, I should say, I don't even know if he got stuck behind traffic. Didn't matter. As soon as he was off the track, Vettel was pushing for all he was worth. And he stayed out until they pretty much made him come in.
So that's the top 4 out of the way. And even that wasn't enough to give Daniel Ricciardo the win, because there was about 3 other cars that should have won that race that we talked about. The Force Indias, Matt, could easily have won that race.
They could have, but they were responsible for much of the debris on the second restart. As they drove into each other rather spectacularly. And I do want to talk about this later because
yes, we will.
You would not think it was Formula One. You'd think you're going to see a prize fight the way they've been talking about each other in the press. But back to the thing, not just the Force Indias. Let's not forget that the initial safety car was kicked off by Max Verstappen's Red Bull going kaput in a rather spectacular fashion right along the main straight.
And Verstappen, who is Daniel Ricciardo's teammate, Ricciardo being the eventual winner, he was up ahead. Ricciardo wasn't even in the fight. He had a puncher. He had to come in. No, he didn't have a puncher. He had something stuck in his airflow or something like that, but he had to come in because his radiator was blocked. In any case, his race had looked to be over. His teammate, Max Verstappen, would have been the fastest car on track had his engine not given up. So that's the Lewis Hamilton. Headrest came off. Sebastian Vettel, penalty. Bottas and Raikkonen, incident where they've smashed into each other, the 2 Finns, that's 4. The 2 Force India drivers could have won this, but they smashed into each other. Max Verstappen, how many are we on now? 7, 6, 7, engine failure. Felipe Massa.
Yes, whose car just stopped working on the last restart when he was like, oh, look, I could actually finally win a race again. His car went, yep, sorry. No,
and that's a race win. So without all those incidents, Daniel Ricciardo was looking at scraping back into a points finish. But instead, he ended up picking the race win. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. It was spectacular.
Yes, and let's not forget that Valtteri Bottas was a lap down until the first safety car when he got sent around. And had you gone with my bog standard podium, if you don't know who to pick Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, and Sebastian Vettel in that order, always across a whole season, you'll probably be right more often than you're wrong. He wound up coming P2 from 1 lap down. I don't even know. It surely has happened before, but not often.
No, absolutely not often. That's right. He was a whole lap down. There is a rule in Formula One, though, when there's a safety car, any car that's been lapped is allowed to overtake the safety car first and quickly get around and unlap itself. Not quite sure why, but that does give an out to cars who've had an absolutely disastrous start. So he had a great recovery, and then the podium was finished off by young Canadian Lance Stroll. That poor billionaire, he struggled all the way to Formula One with mere billions at his side, but it looks to have paid off after a somewhat embarrassing start to the season. He's ended up picking points up in Canada and then a podium up in Baku. Yes, there was attrition, but slow and steady won the podium on this occasion. He just about held on.
Yeah, it was delightful to see someone just so genuinely happy to be doing as well as they were doing on the podium. No jaded celebrations, but just genuine happiness and joy. And at Williams, too. They've invested a lot in trying to bring him along. And he's shown some signs of coming to life, and this is a big validation for him.
And it's worth saying that last week I did tell you to put money on Stroll to finish in the top 6. And in fact, well, I think a podium you'd have called me nuts. But yeah, certainly top 6 due to his steady head at the moment. It looks like when there's high attrition races, he's going to be somebody to look for to just keep it on the track when all others aren't. Okay, let's look at Austria. Not quite a novelty track, Matt, but a little bit different to the rest of the calendar.
Yeah, a little bit different. You do have some nice elevation change. Unlike the last race, you've got acres of runoff, so your chances of a safety car are much, much less. It is pretty fast. It's not as fast as Baku, but it's not too far off. And there's only a little bit of braking, but the braking there is pretty sharp. There's only 3 main braking events, two nasty corners, and then the combination to come back around onto the start finish. A little bit is worth paying attention to. And where that's an issue is you're going to get cold brakes because you're running for longer periods of time without using your brakes. And once again, energy management is going to be key because there's not a lot of time to regenerate the ERS. So again, we could see the cars with a better energy management doing better over the course of a whole race. Now, obviously, qualifying is quite different, but over the course of a race, that's where you're going to be won and lost.
So, speaking of winning and losing then, we want to talk about who's going to be the winning car. Yeah, it's a power track, but also I think you need a bit of savvy, you need a good balance and a good setup to get around here, especially the last 2 turns, the double right-hander. Not an overtaking opportunity per se, but you see a lot of cars going wide on the final turn, especially in qualifying. So I think a good balance and a good setup here is essential. Of course, the 2 top teams do have that, but interestingly, looking at the odds on Bet365 this week, Mercedes are 4-11 to be the winning car over the course of the Grand Prix weekend, and Ferrari are a very surprising 2-1. And I think that's the longest I've seen them for a while, Matt. And when we say Ferrari, we do mean Sebastian Vettel. No offense to Kimi fans. I know Kimi Raikkonen is very popular in the second Ferrari, but Kimi Raikkonen isn't going to win a race this season. That's my prediction. He's not going to win a race this season. So when you talk about race wins, Matt,
I just say be careful. You probably would have said the same thing about Ricciardo just a few minutes before Baku.
In fact, I think I definitely did say that. In fact, on our podcast, Matt Summerfield of motorsport.com said something similar. Oh no, it's not going to be a Red Bull win this season. No way. That's exactly how he speaks. He's from Birmingham. That was perfect. But no, all things being equal, events like Baku notwithstanding, Kimi Raikkonen's not a guy to be betting on for a race win. He just doesn't have the pace of those other top 4 cars. So when we talk about Ferrari to win, we're really talking about Vettel to win. There's no point putting a bet 2-1 on Ferrari. You may as well go for 12-5 for Sebastian Vettel instead. But do you not think it's interesting that the odds have lengthened for Ferrari as we get into the season?
I think the odds have lengthened for Ferrari because they've been forced to stop burning oil during qualifying.
That's a vital point, Matt. Tell the listeners something about it just briefly.
Well, there was just this little controversy at the start of the season that some teams were using their oil in the combustion chamber during qualifying for extra power. And there's a couple of different ways that can work, and you probably don't care about them. But suffice to say, it was enough of a concern that the FIA hemmed and hawed and wrote some technical directives and demanded to see some thises and that's. And then it came up again, somewhat rather more urgently, and now the teams had to give the FIA fuel oil levels before and after the race. And pretty much at this point, it came out that Ferrari had been running a second oil tank. And mysteriously, after this second, more firm restriction from the FIA, that second fuel oil tank disappeared from their car. And we heard from one Christian Horner, who was all too happy to spill the beans.
The boss of Red
that
Bull.
Basically, yeah, Christian Horner from Red Bull. Basically, Mercedes had picked up an ex-Ferrari employee, James Allison, we believe, who had filled in Mercedes on exactly how Ferrari were doing what they did. And then Mercedes kind of went to the FIA, you might assume in payback for having their fancy suspension system banned.
Yeah.
And returned the favor.
So the long and the short of it is that Ferrari are down on power because they are now limited to their stock limited quota of fuel, and they're no longer being able to burn engine oil as fuel as well.
Right. And this will affect them in qualifying a lot. However, I've seen some analyses of race pace that show that it's not such a big deal in the race proper. And this may give you an edge in terms of the odds, because in the race, they might be much closer than they will be during qualifying.
Yep, that's absolutely true. At this time, I don't think there's worth a bet on Valtteri Bottas, because just on form, just on pace alone, Lewis Hamilton is making Bottas look ordinary.
Yes, he is, except for tell me where Bottas got his first ever front row start.
I thought it was Canada, to be honest, but you're going to tell me it's Austria. Okay, it's Austria.
That's where he got his first ever podium for Williams.
Okay, but let's also remember that Bottas had a reputation for being good around Montreal. However, again, he was completely outclassed by Lewis Hamilton there. Guys, the people to bet on the top two teams are Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes and Vettel for Ferrari. Don't waste the time with the other two guys unless the odds go out massively. Okay, so we're going to talk about your favourite driver pair at Force India. They have been key in the betting wars because when there's high attrition, and even when there hasn't been, on pace, Force India are actually looking impressive. Their problem at the moment isn't pace. Their problem is bringing it home and not crashing into each other or getting in each other's way.
Yeah, and this is like prize fight rhetoric right here. You got to love it. Perez was first to strike by saying that it's all fine, that Ocon just needed to be, quote unquote, intelligent about how he drove the car. And this was followed up by Ocon a day later saying, well, I don't know. When I was debriefed by the team, they pretty much said it was a 50-50 thing, and we'd both probably done some stuff that we shouldn't have. So I think if there's a bet, the bet is going to be that one or the other Force India is going to be taken off the track in pieces.
Do you know what? That's not bad, and we'll get to the first to retire betting options first. But yeah, I mean, the Force India guys, to me, any team that's going to break through into the top six out of the rest of the pack, it is Force India. They're in a bit of an ascendancy. However, they've got the experienced Checo Perez, who is the faster and the more experienced Grand Prix driver for now, and certainly a driver I'm a fan of. But he is being harassed by the young Esteban Ocon, who Matt is a massive biased fanboy of, and he will tell you to put your mortgage on him, but you don't have to listen. You don't have to listen to Trumpets. He's biased.
The odds are just better because he's a rookie. But what I will point out, for those of you who want a little history lesson, is back in the day when Sergio Perez drove for McLaren. And guess who his teammate was? Jenson lack of grip Button. And I don't know if you remember this race, but I think it was Monaco where Button got on the radio and complained vigorously about the aggressiveness of Perez's driving. And I'm just thinking, wow, shoe's kind of on the other foot now, isn't it?
Yeah, he doesn't like it. The thing is, we have to remember that Sergio Perez pays a lot of money for that drive at Force India. And if it comes down to team orders, i.e. the two Force Indias line astern, I don't think that the team orders will ever favour the young rookie. I think it will come down on Sergio Perez, and I think it will all season because he pays a lot of cash to be there and supports the team. So it's a dream shot for me. A Force India on the podium. That's a dream bet. Top three. Sergio Perez to be that driver, 10-1. So that's a flutter. That is definitely a flutter, but it's one that excites me. For his young buck teammate, who some would say is showing him up, it's 33-1. So maybe a real value bet is Esteban Ocon, 33-1 to finish on the podium. For a points finish, which is far more realistic for the Force India boys, let me see. Let me just scroll over. Here we go. So Esteban Ocon is 2-5 to finish in the points. But what I really want is the top six, isn't it, Matt? I've made a mistake there. Bear with me. I'm flicking through my phone, you see. Yeah, no, they're dead cert to score double points, and unfortunately, right now I can't find the top 6 odds, but betting on them to finish in the top 6, which is most bookies will offer those odds because traditionally Formula One only used to give points for the top 6. Now it's for the top 10. So look at the odds for those 2 boys to finish in the top 6. That's actually quite a realistic bet. Both of those cars have a good chance of getting there. Where do we want to move on to next? Go on, Matt.
I think we should talk about Honda.
Honda.
They're bringing a Spec 3 engine, which was run at Baku, brings about 16 brake horsepower, more or less. I've seen estimates that put it around there. And it spent the last couple of weeks at the factory being properly mapped and will be deployed in both of the McLarens. And I don't know if you looked at Alonso's top speeds in Baku, but they were suddenly not that far off for his top speed down the straight. We could be looking at, Alonso in the points. May not be a bad call.
Alonso in the points then is 11 to 10, so I think the bookies agree with you. I think reliability is a big factor when it comes to betting on a McLaren, especially with the Honda in the back. But 11 to 10, if you want to cheer Alonso on to get points, that's a good bet.
Right. So let's talk about some more teammates. Let's talk about the Haas teammates. And looking at the racetrack with short, sharp, and severe braking, who could we possibly pick that doesn't have problems with his brakes?
Okay, so Romain Grosjean has been widely publicised whinging on the radio about his brakes. Something to do with his braking style is not agreeing with, I think, the Brembo brakes in that Team Haas car. No doubt a very, very fast driver, but at the moment, he is ending up on the exit of just about every heavy braking zone because he just can't get that car stopped in the way he wants to. Kevin Magnussen, his teammate from Denmark, seems to have taken a more pragmatic view and is simply not braking to the edge of his talent, and he's managing those brakes a lot better. So if you want to bet on the Dane, Kevin Magnussen, to pick up a point, it's 7 to 4. Romain Grosjean is also at 7 to 4. However, you've got to think that the chances of the brakes surviving on the Dane's car, on Kevin Magnussen's car, are much higher.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And then there's this one last little bit of news about also one of my favorite drivers, Carlos Sainz, which is he's pretty much said that if he's not moving to Red Bull next year,
he's out of Toro Rosso.
So you got to wonder what that's going to do. He swears he's going to work just as hard, and it's definitely in his interest to do so. But the Toro Rosso itself is not a great car. It's known on the grid as being fairly draggy, and this is a fast circuit with lots of elevation change. And they have the Renault running in the back of their car. They are bringing some updates, but I don't know. I still favor Sainz over Kvyat when all is said and done. But Kvyat's looked pretty good the last 2 races.
Yeah, and the odds do reflect that Sainz is still considered the talent. So for points again, and these are all the midfield teams, and to be honest, it is a bit of a coin toss who gets into the points here. The points positions pretty much tied up at the front by the top 4, Mercedes, the 2 Red Bull cars, the 2 Ferrari cars, perhaps the 2 Force Indias, and then the Williams probably bringing it back up. So the last points are really between the Williams, Toro Rosso, Haas teams, and possibly Honda. So there's this kind of little mini battle for the win of picking up the last few points. And if you fancy the Toro Rosso boys and the much fancied Carlos Sainz, that's 10 to 11 on Bet365 at the moment to get into the points paying positions, and 11 to 8 for Danny Kvyat, his Russian teammate. And I think that is a good reflection of the gap in talent. However, Carlos Sainz has kind of lost his mind over the last 3 races, so maybe one to avoid on this occasion.
Yeah, and you know who we haven't talked about? I'm sorry we didn't get to him because he was in Baku, again, given practically an open goal, is Hülkenberg. And he just drove right into a wall.
We forgot another person who could have won the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was Nico Hülkenberg. He was ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, and he just put it in the wall. He just fluffed it. That guy has got an aversion to podiums. Nico Hülkenberg is yet to score a podium in his long F1 career. That was a golden opportunity to do so, and you have to say he choked. Whatever. I'm not a Formula 1 driver, but, as armchair fans, we can say, yeah, he did. He choked on that one. And wow, yeah, Daniel Ricciardo really, really lucky to pick up that win. It's not worth betting on the Red Bulls at all to win here. what's the odds? The odds of a Red Bull winning here are 10-1. And we're talking dream scenario here for them to win at their home track. It's called the Red Bull Ring. So 10-1 for either of those boys to pick it up? I wouldn't.
No. But I'd be interested in the odds for Verstappen to place third. He's not finished 4 out of his last 6 races, and he's been mighty quick.
Well, I can tell you that.
I seem to recall him doing well at this track before. And it is the Red Bull home track. It doesn't favor their car, but it is their home track.
Okay, just under 3-1 then. So 11-4 for Max Verstappen to pick up a podium. Why not? That kid is talented. He is fast. With a bit of luck and a couple of retirements with the top 2 teams, he could pick up a podium.
Yes, and possibly also a little bit of rain, which might occur during the race on Sunday, I should mention.
Yeah, oh yeah. If it rains and you can still get those odds on the Red Bulls, then that changes the equation completely, because in the rain, a lot of downforce helps, and it's not that they've got the best downforce, it's that their deficit to the top teams is not as high when it comes to downforce as it is to, say, power.
Right, exactly. And in the wet, that matters a lot less. But what also matters is that Verstappen is just genuinely very talented when the track gets wet. And they are predicting a 60% chance of scattered thunderstorms.
Okay,
during the race. I see 0.02 accumulation, some rain and thunder in the area, but they're in the mountains. And I don't know if you know the saying about the mountains. If you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. It'll change.
Tell you what then, here's a good way to finish off then. Let's list down on the grid who we think are the masters of the rain. When it rains, you get low grip, and it suits a certain type of driver. It seems to suit the drivers that did very well in their karting days. So I think the standout at the moment who has caught people's attention, especially in Brazil last year, is Max Verstappen. He just takes a completely different line to everybody else, finds grip when no one else seems to.
Absolutely. And now I can take away your favorite driver from you and go with Lewis Hamilton, who has been just genuinely brilliant in the wet.
Yes.
And just gave one of the most awe-inspiring drives I've ever seen, qualifying for Spa in the wet a couple of years ago, where he finished ahead of Vettel in the Red Bull in the Mercedes before the engine change. And he said, oh, well, the Delta on my dash just said I was a minute behind, so I just drove as fast as I could.
Ayrton Senna, of course, was great in the rain. In fact, a lot of people will say the great drivers are defined by their ability to drive in the rain.
And I completely agree with that. One other person on the grid who we know who was supposed to be very good in the wet is Carlos Sainz, also one of my favorite drivers, has done exceedingly well in the wet. And we can't forget Sebastian Vettel. His first points ever were scored in a Toro Rosso in a rain-soaked race.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, Daniel Ricciardo, the winner of last week's race, tends to go completely anonymous in the wet. Don't know why that is. So just bear that in mind. If the rain starts falling in the mountains, you're going to have to change a few bets. Matt, good luck to you in your betting for the Austrian GP. Good luck to the listeners. And remember that wounds heal, chicks dig scars, and glory lasts forever. This was Missed Apex. Oh, I forgot I have to click stop at my end. Bye, guys.